Okay, so let's talk about the context of Christmas and A Christmas Carol. So firstly, let's have a look at the title. So the title has religious significance because A Christmas Carol is something that is sung in church to celebrate the birth of Jesus. So although this is not a Bible text, it is certainly a religious allegory, which is a story that has meaning. So the title has symbolic significance straight away. So everyone in 1843 would have understood that Christmas was a time for charity, giving and support for the poorest in society, which is incredibly ironic considering the poor law was in place, the workhouses, and Scrooge very much embodies this feeling of the time, the Thomas, Malthus feeling that the poor were a drain on society. So symbolically, Scrooge is the I can't even say that word today, is the opposite of this. Okay, so the name symbolically can also represent festivity, joy and celebration, not only as a family, but as a family in the blessing of God, and further as a part of the whole of humanity. So it's very much about the whole of humanity, not just London at the time. Remember, the Ghost of Christmas Present takes Scrooge on a journey, and we see lots of different factions of society. So in the eyes of God, we're all seen as the same, and allegorically, this could be part of Dickens's message and the reason he uses wealth and poverty as key to underpinning the themes in the novel. He wanted to reinforce this Christian message and the fact that God had sent Jesus to save us, and even this unselfish act had little to no impact. Remember, Dickens was a believer of practical Christianity. He very much felt that we needed to do good deeds, not just show up to church, not just give money to religion. He very much wanted people to act on the Christian message in his novella. So let's consider the Christian story, the Christmas story. So Christmas is a traditional day of celebration on the 25th of December, and Christians all around the world celebrate that day. So as we know, Mary and Joseph travelled from Bethlehem to Jerusalem to pay their taxes. They had nowhere to stay, and the innkeeper took pity on them, allowing them to pass the night in his barn with the animals. And so it came to pass that baby Jesus was born, surrounded by animals and in an extremely humble dwelling, suggesting that all men are equal in the eyes of God. So very much this story has a parallel with Scrooge. So Scrooge also goes on a journey to his redemption on Christmas Eve. In fact, he takes 3 journeys: into the past, a look at the present, and a journey into the bleak and unforgiving future. So perhaps this is why this story is so significant, that his epiphany and great change happens on Christmas morning, a time when traditionally we celebrate equally with all men and forget our differences. And you've got to remember that this is an allegory. So Scrooge himself turns away the little boy at the keyhole. He turns away the charity collectors. So just like Jesus, Mary and Joseph were turned away on the night before his birth, Scrooge is also doing the same. So Christmas morning in A Christmas Carol is symbolic of Scrooge's rebirth into kind of the Christian family. So Christmas Eve has massive significance, and rather than preparing to celebrate Christmas, Scrooge is busy working, worshipping at his money, it's his golden idol. So we're introduced to this season and the significance of the season through the pathetic fallacy in the opening stave. So we're told that he carried his own low temperature always about him, and he didn't thaw it 1 degree at Christmas, showing us that Scrooge is miserly, unpleasant and difficult throughout the entire year, and chooses not to alter his persona in relation to societal expectations. So even if you're a grumpy person, there's an expectation that at Christmas that you'll be a little bit jolly, a little bit kinder. So the pathetic fallacy used in stave 1 also kind of reinforces this harsh bitterness of the winter that people faced in these times, and shows us that men like Scrooge, who were fortunate enough to have wealth, could, if they chose, to alleviate some of the pain and suffering in society. Yet he doesn't warm his cold temperature. He doesn't put coal in his office. So in this way, Scrooge is showing us how neglectful and willfully degenerative nature of man that God was trying with his son Jesus as a messenger to change. So it's basically Dickens saying that the Christmas story, the Christian allegory, has gone woefully wrong. So Scrooge juxtaposes everything that Christmas and Christianity is about. his God is shown very clearly in the next reference to Christmas. Of all the good days of the year, on Christmas Eve, old Scrooge sat busy in his counting house, showing that his idol or God is a golden one, it's wealth. And even at this time of year, when everybody else is looking forward to family time, even Bob, who has very little, and people are looking forward to this day off, he continues to work and scrabble away in his office, poring over the accounts and his business alone, except for Bob, who's there, who's waiting to go home for Christmas. The fact that he doesn't even want to pay him for his Christmas day just illustrates how miserly and mean he is, that he hasn't got a single bit of positive joy or Christian and charitable values in his body. Okay, so one of the easiest quotes to remember is every time someone kind of says Merry Christmas in the novel, Scrooge responds with bah, humbug. So Fred bounces in, Merry Christmas, Uncle, but that doesn't even escape Scrooge's kind of merciless unhappiness and pessimism. He says that he'll retire to Bedlam, which is one of my favourite lines in the entire novella. At the time in 1843, this was a really well-known insane asylum, commonly used for the lowest and most unfortunate in society. To show how desperately against Christmas he is, while exclaiming about having to pay a wage for his clerk to have the day off. He's like, he's moaning about having to pay for Bob's Christmas day. And he's saying, I would go to Bedlam before I would celebrate Christmas. Like, that's how much he dislikes it. So furthermore, when, a moment later, the symbolically charitable portly gentlemen arrive in to, ask for some money to support these poor people in places like Bedlam, Scrooge exclaims, are there no prisons? Are there no workhouses? Knowing fully that they are there and that the conditions in those are the worst possible and that no man, woman or child would voluntarily go to seek shelter unless he had absolutely no other choice. Remember, these words are later repeated back to him in stage 3 by the ghost of Christmas Present, and he's ashamed that he says it because he realises that, these are not pleasant places to be. So in this way, Dickens reminds us that poverty is rife in London and that some wealthy people were trying to amend the fortunes of the poor, people like Dickens. However, it was not having the impact it should due to the slow changing attitudes of society and the self-serving nature of some of the people who could promote change. So people like Thomas Malthus very much believed if you improve the quality of life for poor, you would decrease the quality of life for everybody, and they didn't want that. So the division of wealth and poverty is further reinforced due to the nature of the season. It's supposed to be about charity and giving. Instead, we see that for Scrooge, it feels like an excuse to try and rob him of some of his wealth, a thought process that goes against kind of the charitable nature of the Christmas season. He feels like Bob is picking his pocket, is stealing from him by having this day off. So it would be impossible to look at the importance of Christmas without thinking about the significance of religion in the novella and in the first stave, when we see the scripture brought to life in the tiles of Scrooge's fireplace, Cain and Abel. So there's this reference to the biblical story linked to Am I my brother's keeper, which came about as a result of the murder of Abel by Cain, who was left to regret his entire lifetime, perhaps being a symbol for the wealthy, including Scrooge's treatment of their brothers, as in the brotherhood of mankind. So in his fireplace, this story is referenced. Abel is murdered by his brother, and that symbolically becomes a metaphor for the whole of mankind, that Scrooge and people like him are responsible for the murder of the poor by knowingly letting them live in circumstances that will ultimately lead to their early deaths. Okay, so let's talk about the ghosts of Christmas past and Christmas. So Kindness is shown by the ghost of the past. He is shown to be this candle flickering, and at times he's too bright to show Scrooge the errors of his ways and to show Scrooge how he was in his past. He literally shines a light on Scrooge's past memories. So how this may link to Christmas is that in church we light a candle for someone, which indicates our intention to say a prayer for another person, and the candle symbolises that prayer. Remember, I've told you in class that in key moments throughout a child's life, candles are often, presented as a way of showing the child the right way, showing the child the light. So here in A Christmas Carol, the symbolic reference to the candle can be seen to have connotations of the ghost being the bringer of light to Scrooge's life. Remember, he's the one who initially thaws him. He draws the tear from him when he realises that he's in his childhood school, and causes Scrooge to sob with grief when he sees his solitary self in the school alone. So it's almost as if someone has said a prayer for Scrooge's repentance, and the first ghost is representative of this. So in stage 2, we see the season used as a way of showing how Scrooge has some connections with his own feelings, showing that Christmas itself can bring out the best even in the most miserable of people. Why was he filled with gladness when he heard them give each other a Merry Christmas? Showing perhaps that Scrooge is capable of simple human emotions, which was not obvious in stage 1. Remember, this is the start of his journey. We also see this idea of Scrooge becoming more in tune with the season's intentions when he wants to give the carol singers something. So Christmas cheer and the role of the employer in ensuring equitable and fair conditions for their employees is also shown in stage 2, with the party of Fezziwig. The party that Fezziwig holds for the staff there. So here Christmas is used as an opportunity to celebrate with everyone and to allow the workers to have a great time, meaning that they may be more productive and loyal. It is interesting that Scrooge has forgotten these events and shows that he once enjoyed the season himself. But remember, we have talked about this in class, like why does he forget that? It's because it's such a small part of his life before kind of greed and avarice takes over. And remember that greed and avarice very much comes from him being a solitary, poor child. It was a way of protecting himself from the world. And I love this picture of the ghost of Christmas Present because it's the one from the Muppets Christmas Carol, and I think it really embodies like this vision of him as a jolly giant. You know, it conjures this imagery of this benevolent Father Christmas, which we see is reinforced by the way he sprinkles the Christmas cheer on the most unfortunate in society. So Christmas in this stave is an opportunity for sharing and caring, and he reinforces this throughout the stave when he shows the most unfortunate in society enjoying their meagre surroundings, their food and gifts, because they're with others they care about. So not only does he take us to see the Cratchits, we also go to see the people in the lighthouse, we go to see the miners, the sailors. He shows that it doesn't matter where you are as long as you are with people who, you know, love you and care for you. So very much this stave makes a mockery of stave 1, where Scrooge rejected his own family, Fred, by refusing his kind invite to share Christmas Day with them. So in this stave, we see the true meaning of Christmas reflected in the way that Tiny Tim reacts. So despite his disability, his hardships, his poverty, his illness, and the fact that he suffers, on the way home from church, he reflects that it might be pleasant for them to remember on Christmas Day who made lame beggars walk and blind men see, which is a wisdom that belies his youth and shows that stories from the Bible have permeated into society and should act as a reminder of how to behave humanely and towards each other. Remember, very much Dickens is trying to adopt that religious allegory, this parable-like tale through this story. He wants to remind people that they should act as Jesus did, and they should act as the people who were followers of Jesus. So many other references are made to Christmas, the importance of family and the way in which the season should be reflected in the humanities actions that we see in this stave. So how do we see Christmas in the final stave? So as the book progresses and we see the ghost of Christmas yet to come, who symbolically represents an impression of the Grim Reaper and who doesn't talk, we see Scrooge change and recognise that he has to learn and he has to change or he will die. And the purgatory that Marley suffers from will be his fate too. We see the death of Tiny Tim, which seems to take the heart out of the Cratchit family. And at the end of stave 4, Scrooge decrees, "I will keep Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all the year," which shows that he's realised the error of his ways. The repetition of this at the start of stave 5 and his redemption throughout the final stave of the book also reinforces the idea that Christmas can be a new start. Jesus was sent from heaven by God as his only son to redeem humanity, and this redemption is shown in the change and epiphany that Scrooge has. His transformation in Day 5 and his promise to live in the past, the present and the future shows that Dickens believes anyone is able to change, and that remembering the meaning of Christmas is pivotal in this change process. Scrooge's actions throughout the final stave show that Christmas has a humbling effect and promotes the idea that we are all equal in the eyes of God. So interestingly, the final lines of the novella are given to Tiny Tim, who does not die, which was his fate if Scrooge had not changed, and he says, "God bless us, everyone," showing the importance of the allegorical meaning of the novel to live a good life with God in your heart and keep Christmas spirit in your heart all year round, because in this way you are showing you are caring for others.